In a small provincial town in the Ardell family, the long-awaited heir was born. Parents were beside themselves with happiness, and mother gave him the name of the Ruans. One day, his father's assistant gathered for groceries, but Ruan suddenly stopped him and asked not to go to the southern mountain. Skeptically reacted to the words of the child, he still listened. Later in the evening, the man returned home wet and shocked. It turned out that at that moment the beastless attack occurred on the South Mountain. If he went there, he would not return alive. Ruan's father was shocked, realizing that his son had unusual abilities, and over time his magical talent manifested itself more and more. At 10 years old, Ruan entered the Magical Academy in the magic, bypassing children from noble families. He was recognized as a genius, and it seemed that his future was a foregone conclusion. Will he be able to raise the status of his family? But when in the first lesson the teacher asked him to demonstrate skills to reveal the Ruans far from the best. Moreover, his body turned out to be absolutely unsuitable for magic. The whole academy quickly recognized the truth. The best beginner turned out to be the worst student. Mockery and bullying became his new reality, and self-confidence began to melt rapidly. Ruan was already beginning to doubt if he had a future at all. In the graduation class, he was waiting for a test. It was necessary to create a fireball and accurately hit the goal of the simplest task for any student. However, Ruan knew that he would not work out, but decided to try. To the surprise everyone, a huge fireball appeared in his hands. No one expected that he would have so many mana. But suddenly mana ended in one hand and the ball stopped moving. The teacher was disappointed. If he cannot cope with the basic spell, he simply will not pass the final exams. On the final tasks, it was necessary to create 10 fireballs. Pressure, ridicule of peers, envy. All this pressed him, and he almost lost faith in himself. Later in the corridor, 2 naps began to provoke him, ridiculing his family. Banquet called his father an arrogant insignificance. If before that he could restrain himself, then this time the honor of his family. Ruan could not restrain himself and hit him. A fat friend wanted to hit a friend, but also received a blow. Ben decided to take advantage of magic, which was prohibited in the walls of the academy. Suddenly a ball of lightning escaped from his hands. The teacher arrived, but the blow has already reached the Ruan. Everyone thought that this was the end, but something incredible happened. Ruan felt as if plunging into the depths, as if underwater. A mysterious status window opened in front of him. He became the embodiment of the fight of the destroyer of the worlds. A great magician appeared near him, but Ruan was sure that it was a dream. However, the magician spoke with him and named his name. The boy woke up and saw a pretty healer, Helen. She explained that he had lost consciousness, but surprisingly there was not a single scratch on his body. Despite the fact that he took a direct lightning blow, he was not injured. Teacher Hadel entered the chamber. He said that Ben was excluded for the use of magic and the spread of rumors. However, the Ruan also did not get away with it. For a fight, he was called up for a month in volunteer service. Naturally, the professor was also interested in how the boy survived and therefore began to suspect the presence of an artifact. For a second, an artifact is an ancient weapon with limitless mana. As if it was clear that the Ruan did not have it because he is generally the weakest, and the loser is also a loser. But the teacher told him that before the blow of Ben, he was covered with the red light that defended him. After the conversation, the teacher left, leaving the Ruan in his thoughts. And then a status window again appeared in front of him. He could not believe his eyes. At that moment, his healer Helen entered the ward. She asked with concern what happened to him, but Ruan did not know what to answer. He lied, saying that everything was in order. When the guy left the hospital, a new window with tasks suddenly appeared. It had a list of physical exercises that he had to do. For each task, he received bonuses to force. After completing the tasks, he felt how his body changed. The blows became more powerful. The speed increased. The muscles were filled with force. A new power circle skill was also obtained. The fact is that the magicians around the heart form a circle of mana for its presentation. But Ruan disappeared and a circle of power appeared. Everything seemed incomprehensible because how could you be a magician with power circles? He also gained a new passive skill magician of madness. There is a guess that the fight also had such an disorder as our main character. After a new task appeared to create a fireball. In some centuries, he finally managed to control his strength, and it became clear he had the power of an artifact. In short, I was not tired yet and did not fall asleep straight at the training ground. The next morning, classmates found Ruan unconscious at the training ground. Some decided that he had drunk, others had died at all. But suddenly waking up, the guy jumped sharply, scaring everyone to horror. Briefly answering the questions of onlookers, he left without unusual words. Returning to the hostel, the guy ran into Jason Damon, the only student who has always been condescending to him. As the main womanizer, Jason immediately imagined that Ruan spent the night in the company of the girl. Without saying a word, the guy just threw his jacket in his face. Going to the bath, he checked the tasks, having discovered that the number of repetitions doubled and the reward remained the same. The guy realized how difficult his path would be. He accepted the challenge. A month has passed. Not a single missed training because it would be too painful to discard progress. The Ruan has reached 3,000 repetitions of the absolute limit for its body. During this, he unlocked a new skill of body art, skill that significantly enhances its physical abilities. At lectures, he now sat in the back desks, although he used to actively participate in discussions. He spent all his free time in the library, hunting for information about a mysterious fight. Alas, the search was unsuccessful. The same concerned data on status windows and other mysterious phenomena. Once Jason approached him with unexpected news. His father arrived at the academy. This happened for the first time in 6 years, and he was sincerely glad. Having met, they retired for conversation. Father spoke about the younger sister, Rain, who learns the art of owning a sword. The girl wants to become stronger to protect her weak older brother. These words made the guy be embarrassed. But his father did not stop and gently hinted that his son lacks strength to stay at the academy. Ruan was not going to give up. He agreed that if the final exams fail, he himself would leave. If it copes, it will remain. The conditions arranged everyone, and the father left the academy. The day of the exam has come. He coped with the written part of the ruins flawlessly as always. But the most difficult thing was ahead: practice. The first place in this category was traditionally occupied by Mikal. However, this time he was determined to win the victory in all trials. Before the beginning of the practical part, Jason noticed Ruan's confidence. He was glad to find out that a friend had a new way of struggle. But at that moment, Mikal intervened. He did not understand why Ruan generally participates in trials, having a disorder of the release of magic. He advised him not to humiliate himself and just give up. But in the guy's eyes, determination was burning. The first test was to defeat the maximum number of moving targets. The difficulty was increased, and the results were terrible. Professors looked in bewilderment, and some with disappointment. But Professor Elik, Uncle Michel, assured everyone that it was worth looking at his nephew. And he really showed a phenomenal result. Everyone was sure that he would take first place again. Of course, Elik did not hide his pride. However, the head of the academy, Professor Tyrion, politely interrupted his smug speeches. Then Professor Hadel intervened, offering to pay attention to the Ruan. When he entered the arena, he surprised everyone. Thanks to the circles of power, its call speed was instant. At this moment, he received a new passive skill, refraction of time, increasing the speed of movement. Ruan moved like a typhoon, hitting goals with unimaginable accuracy. 27 hits, and the new absolute record of the academy. Tyrion himself, rising from his place, began to applaud. While Ruan was showered with congratulations, Mikal could not believe how this guy managed to surpass everyone. Meanwhile, the delight of others became for Ruan thereby the recognition that he had so missed. At the same time, a hot discussion flared up in the professor's room. Elik could not understand how Ruan was able to release Manu so quickly. He began to argue with Hadel, but Tyrion interrupted them. The head of the academy confidently said that it was nothing more than a miracle. In the meantime, the adults argued, the students continued to admire Ruan. Returning to his room, he ran into Mikal, who literally boiled with rage. Stepping closer, he tried to scare the Ruan, having advised not to be conceived. It sounded like children's nonsense, and when he took a step forward, Ruan easily stopped him, demonstrating his strength. At that moment, he directly stated that he would defeat him in one-on-one battle. Looking at him, Mikal no longer looked so confident and hastily left the room. The next test was the measurement of magical power. It was conducted by the ancient Ogre Kingri, an artifact created 500 years ago by the Archmage. Its purpose is to absorb Manu and evaluate magicians like a boxing pair for blows. But Kingram was not just an examiner. He judged the students harshly and mercilessly. His words humiliated and destroyed confidence, and the losers ran away in tears. The cue reached Michel. He caused a strong emission of mana. But even Kingri called him insignificant, setting only 27 points. He also defiled his parents, calling the father of Michel Bolvan. It was the turn of the Ruan. The guy called on the exploding, devouring mana of the 4th grade magic. and he transferred the spell in the leg after applying the powerful blow to the U.S. Everyone froze, not believing their eyes. Kingris stared at him in stunned and then suddenly said the name of the fight. The students looked at each other. After all, no one understood who we were talking about. Nobody but Ruan. Kingram began to ask him, more and more shocked. He could not believe that in the walls of the academy there was an embodiment of a fight. He even refused to give an assessment, saying that there were too many curious ears around. But he managed to persuade him, and then the artifact set the Ruan 100 points. The academy gasped. After some time, Professor Ardell met in the corridor of Ruan. He said that the head of the academy considers him worthy of awards for 100 points received from Kingram. Having handed the letter, he explained that the Ruan should go to the artifact room. Following the professor, the Ruans faced the only forbidden door of the academy. Ardell allowed him to enter alone and remained outside. The room of artifacts turned out to be a real repository of power. Soon in front of him came Kingri. Now he was not just an artifact, but stood in his own body. OGR explained that this is the only place where he can be in his true form. Kingram said that Ruan does not even realize his value. Then he started talking about the player's artifact. He began to ask how he got him and what he connects him with a fight. It turned out that in ancient times, Kingram already met with him in his tribe. Everyone respected him and revered him. Fighting was not a man. He belonged to the genus of black dragons, Dragagonia. Since he could not use magic, he created circles of strength, what made him the most powerful creature in the world. However, his boundless thirst for strength led to the destruction of everything around, including himself. This conversation brought the Ruan a new achievement to find traces of the fight and the title of Ogre, as well as a new skill, the Fury of the Fence. A strange object arose in his hand. Kingram explained that this item was always next to the fight and had a terrible character. Suddenly the stone shook and a little bear got out of it. However, this cutie was not so kind. He immediately tried to demonstrate that he could take any form, but because of a lack of strength he could not. As a result, loudly saying that he wants to eat, he just fell asleep, demanding to wake him when there is food. Ruan realized his strength and his mission. The guy is going to protect people and demons as well as declare himself to the world. To become stronger, the magician began enhanced training. Countries consumed his strength as food, and at the same time he accelerated the development of the boy. Thanks to the new skill of countries, a companion, every time the hero became stronger, he received a stock of strength. Before Seal to Stone, the country had 31 star. That was a lot. Ruan wanted to gain strength faster, and it was possible. There was an option to look for artifacts, cook an elixir, or perform more difficult tasks. To do this, you need to achieve at least 1,000 forces to keep his body. At the moment, its level was 930, and he continued training. The most dangerous stage of testing has come. Here, magicians could accidentally get into the allies. What happened to Jason? He wounded his knights and dropped out. After 10 days of the competition, there are 13 participants with high points, since each of the students had to fight different monsters. The strongest students got Orc, possessing not only monstrous power but also high intelligence. Mikal was the first to enter the battle and failed. The Orc nearly killed him, and only Professor Ardell saved him, using a wood prison spell. Evil and humiliated, Uncle Michel decided to prevent the Ruan from passing the test. He proposed to give him a fence of an enemy whom even adult warriors were afraid of. It was extremely dangerous, but the head of the academy agreed. Before leaving, the professor warned the Ruan of changing conditions. Everyone knew that the Ogre is more than the Orcs several times. Their blows could split the skull in one movement. The knights were opposed to the Ruan fighting close, but go to the arena himself. Confidently stood in front and not from behind. Thanks to his magic, the guy could effectively conduct a close battle, but others did not understand his tactics. And now the battle began. The Ruan attacked by explosive magic at point blank, throwing a fireball right in the Ogre. Thick smoke flashed, all lurked breathing. When the dust was scattered, the Ruan stood absolutely unharmed. Having exchanged a couple of words with the knights, he again rushed to the attack, not allowing them to intervene. His tactics was to search for a weakness of the enemy. At that moment, he had an emergency task to defeat the enemy on the pouches and strike a fist. Ruan concentrated Manu, activated the refraction of time, and hit the point. The explosion shocked the arena because the fence fell. The crowd exploded with screams. No one could believe that it was possible. Even the knights were asked by Ruan's questions. Naturally, the boy has passed this stage. After the battle, the winner unexpectedly unlocked a mini-card. The countries explained that this ability will allow him to see everything within a radius of 500 meters, and also view the status window of any goal. Having become interested, Ruan checked new opportunities on the fire. Then I decided to see the data of Professor Hadel. However, there was no information about him. It turned out that if someone is stronger than the Ruan, his characteristics will remain hidden. After the third stage, the whole academy only spoke about the boy. Soon, a pretty girl approached him and handed out dinner. He himself was indifferent to this, so he offered his portion to Jason. During the conversation, Ruan took advantage of the player's eyes to appreciate Jason's abilities. The guy's potential was incredibly high. He met only Michelle. He immediately advised Jason to train more hard, assuring that he could achieve amazing results. Meanwhile, the Academy actively discussed the upcoming Great Festival, one of the main events of the year. This is the association of the Magic Festival, where the best student was determined, and the Olympics, in which the title of the strongest magician was played. The winners expected an impressive cash prize and many other awards. However, not everyone could participate. Only one representative and a team of 30 people were chosen from each academy. Naturally, everyone wondered who will become the main participant this year. Most bets were made on Ruan, although earlier the academy was always represented by Mikal. His failures led to the fact that Ignant began to be called a post-academy. They occupied the last place over and over again. But Ruan thought only about the fourth stage of the exam. The battle is one-on-one against Michelle. 4 days after the third stage, the Ruans received 1,000 points of strength. The new achievement has also reached 5,000 repetitions in tasks. Thanks to this, a huge flame broke out around the country. He advanced to the second rank and received an additional 200 points of strength. Now a new training mode has become available in a real battle, and the country showed its capabilities reincarnating in Pugalo. This should help the Ruan in preparation and training. Then the countries reincarnated in the third-grade magician. Ruan could apply any blows without damaging the assistant and without damaging himself. At the same time, Mikal and his uncle, instead of training, developed a plan how to get around the Ruan. The professor invited Mikal to drink the potion of a flaming flower. It reduces the time of calling to mana. To hide the reception of the prohibited substance, he was given another potion. The fourth exam began one-on-one battle. The audience was looking forward to the fight between the Ruan and Mikal. However, when the opponents entered the Ruan arena, immediately felt something was amiss. Using the player's eyes, he found a hidden state of berserk in him. The test for prohibited substances was carried out by Professor Elik, and of course, Mikal passed it. In general, as soon as the battle began, everyone gasped. Mikal released Manu at an incredible speed, attacking spells and fiery breath. He tried to surround the Ruan, but he, using acceleration, easily dodged. Thanks to his knowledge, the boy realized that the opponent really drank the potion of a flaming flower, which means he did not feel pain. Then he changed the tactics, applying the refraction of time. Ruan quickly prevailed, and then having completed the battle with a delicate slogan, and then completely with a blow. Since Mikal did not feel pain, the guy was afraid to kill him and applied the clacking tree spell. As evidence, he demonstrated a sloban on a tree applied to his opponent. The sloban was so strong that the tree broke the tree in half. This confirmed that Mikal does not feel pain. Professor Tyrion was furious and called Professor Elik to the trial. Rumors crawled about the possible exclusion of the Garle family, and the Ruan was all congratulated on the victory. After some time, the winner was called to the office of the head of the academy. However, opening the door, he was surprised. In front of him was not the Academy of Ignant, but the territory of Ardell. The throne of the King of Magicians stood in the center. Ruan did not understand what was happening until the professor approached him and explained. It was an illusion created by the eye of the Malier with a demonic artifact, forcing a person to see what he wants. So the throne of the King of Magicians is what the Ruan himself subconsciously strives for. Also, looking at another door, the guy saw confessions and his victory. In his office, Professor Tyrion asked how Ruan realized that Mikal used the flaming flower. Ruan explained that the opponent acted differently than usual, but did not reveal his player's ability. His observation was very struck by the professor. Then Tyrion announced that the Garle family was excluded. After that, the head of the academy invited the Ruan to represent them at the Great Festival. The Ruans were surprised, although it is objectively the best in the academy. He expressed gratitude but admitted that he was not confident in himself. In response, Tyrion assured him in the opposite, adding that the Ruans will become the secret weapon of the academy. At that moment, the leader of the Knights Order of the territory of Folden entered the office. Ruan was very surprised because this knight was one of the best. Going to the conversation, he invited the guy to study the art of the body in order to make his battle style less predictable. Although the magic of the Ruan was strong, his movements were monotonous. This means that an experienced opponent could read them easily. So Golter became his personal teacher. They began with the basics of the right gait and then moved to the study of heavenly martial art, consisting of 36 tricks. True, the student was perplexed why the knight to teach him, but Golter explained that he considers it an investment in the future, as he sees huge potential in the young man. After 3 weeks of training, Ruans have advanced markedly. The countries said that the fight scored 2,000 points for a whole year, while Ruan coped many times faster, gaining 2130. While Ruan talked with the country, Jason ran up to them and said that the list of participants was ready. The guy experienced the same excitement as 6 years ago upon admission. Approaching the sign, he saw his name among the main representatives. By the way, Jason turned out to be a 31st member of team competitions. In general, Ruan was congratulated by everything, including Professors Ardell. The teacher is amazed that the young man has mastered heavenly martial art and reached the 5th grade at 16 years old. After the rest of the preparations of the Ruans and his team had to go to Altyne by train Mana. This is incredibly fast magical transport. While he was discussing the details with Jason, Henkes, one of the former henchmen of Michel, stuck to them. With him there was a whole group of the same guys who doubt the power of the new representative. They began to argue, claiming that Mikal was stronger, but the Ruans quickly put them in place. He made them understand that he does not intend to be at enmity, but if they do not change the approach, nothing good would come of it. All participants are located in magical transport. However, calm did not last long. Representatives of the OTU Institute appeared in the car. These students arrived for a reason. Their goal was to humiliate the representatives of the Ignant Academy, especially Garle. The Institute of OTU was the only educational institution in the Sandy Kingdom, and was famous for its outstanding magicians. In their eyes, Ignan looked like a weak rival, and they did not even hide their contempt. But now the representative of Ignat was Ruan. When the representatives of the Out finally noticed the Ruan, their surprise was obvious. Their leader, Set Malkiri, came forward. The guy decided to meet, but Ruan sharply besieged him, making it clear that he did not intend to endure their antics. Due to the fact that the guy said to apologize, the enemy was angry and wanted to rush into a fight. But at that moment, Professor Oit entered the car, dispersing the students in places. The teacher and Set himself began to discuss the new one, emphasizing that he was convinced of him with confidence and he did not look like Garishel. But it's time to think about the tests of the festival. In the wagon, Ignan, in the full discussion of the first stage, was a group. Considering that Ignat's team was weaker than others, she had little chance. However, seeing how the Ruan opposes the offenders, the students began to rally. He showed how worthy to answer those who do not respect the rivals, and this strengthened the fighting spirit of the team. While there was a discussion of the strategy, the train imperceptibly arrived at the Duchy of Altyne, the venue of the festival. By the way, it was a neutral territory where bloodshed was prohibited, and precisely because of this, all the competitions were held there. Arriving, the participants immediately noticed representatives of the Imperial Federation of Rhinoc, who shone with wealth and beautiful girls. After a short respite, the carriage took them to the place of residence. During the path of countries, he caught a strange smell. In this place was clearly the relic of the fight. The next day, the Ruans and countries went in search of a mini-card. Their path brought touching memories to the workshop. Using the player's eye, the Ruans found there a ring of invulnerability. The countries recognized this artifact. It was the first failed experiment of the fight. His power did not give in to control. She could work both in battle and randomly on close people. In any case, the Ruans bought it, and the force instantly increased by 200 points. But to surprise, the seller gave the ring for free. It dusted for too long idle because no one could use the circles of power except for the fight itself. In gratitude, Ruan decided to buy something else. Applying the player's eye, he began to look among books and found a rare specimen of the quantum mechanisms of magic and sword. However, another participant in the festival, Iran Prius, claimed this artifact. She studied at the Seiki Women's University and was the third in potential among the magicians of her generation. Even King Tarian Artemis, known as a dirty king, included her in the list of 11 of the most promising magicians of the future. Irene was the magician of the 5th rank. Seeing the shape of the Ruan, she guessed that he was from the Ignant Academy and asked her to give in to the book as she came for her. Ruan asked why she was her, but she was silent. As a result, he nevertheless lost. Arriving back, he was immediately surrounded by his comrades, envious of the meeting with Irene. Jason, who dreamed of meeting her, asked what they were talking about. One of those present said that Irene always took second places, losing to the Duma Prime, the owner of a shining sword. Only now the Ruans understood why she needed this book. However, it is not easy to be a magical swordsman because it is difficult to train in this area, and reaching the top is even more difficult. Duma was unique because he owned the S-class artifact and fought at the level of the Middle Knights. During the conversation, the opening of the first matches was announced. The first opponent of Ignat was the Institute of Oet. Their representatives immediately began to boast, assuring that the victory was in their pocket. But the Ruan decided to introduce himself to everyone and calmly say that from now on, Ignan from now on will not be a post-academy as everyone called. The chief representative of the Outer and asked who was to say so. Ruan proudly replied that he was a secret weapon. The opponents were wary and tried to learn more about him. They found out that before the guy took the last places, but in the graduation year, unexpectedly showed incredible results. Ignita's team began to develop a strategy for tomorrow's competition. These were group battles in which the participants had to throw grenades of mana in golems. Ruan offered none. Standard tactics: one group warms up mana grenades, the second is responsible for their delivery, the third attacks the golem, and the fourth herates the enemy goal. Many doubted this regard. But the Ruan, using the eye of the player, correctly distributed students in roles. Suddenly, the beaten by Fully ran into Ignat's camp and said that the Outs did it. The angry Ruan went to their leader, Sete Malkiri. The guy took him by the shoulder and knelt without much effort. Seth got angry and rushed to the attack, but the Ruan easily intercepted him. He offered the insolent bet on the Sloban. Everyone had even more motivation because everyone wanted to see how the Ruans would punish the insolent. In general, the time came to the arena. Before the start of the guy, Irerin saw. Hearing about his conflict with the outcome, she decided to give advice so that he would not reveal her true power at once. In general, the competition has begun. Everyone was sure that Ignat's tactics would not work. But Irene noticed that each participant was perfectly distributed in his strength. This surprised her pretty much. Soon the right hand of Golem Ignat fell. Otoda already felt their defeat. And then Jason struck a decisive blow, and Ignat's victory was declared. After the victory, everyone was struck by the fact that they were no longer a post-academy. However, I did not have to rejoice for a long time. A new test awaited ahead. The next task for the main representatives was called to grab the flag, and the match was held between the Ruan and Set Malkiri. When they entered the arena, the Ruans were focused not only on the battle. He was thinking about how to rise above and stop being the last. Most of all, he wanted to show himself to the King of Magicians. Among the jury members, the formidable King Theron sat. He noticed Ruan and was very interested in him. Once he was disappointed in this young man, learning about his disorder of the liberation of mana. However, now, looking at him in the arena, he experienced a burning interest. Finally, the battle began. Seta rushed at the Ruan with lightning speed. He used the call of a combat defender, but the enemy was faster. He applied the refraction of time and managed to stop the attack of Malkiri. Moreover, he sent his own opponent's attack against himself. It seemed that the outcome of the battle was already decided, but the Ruan suddenly stopped the blow. He actually saved the opponent, which surprised everyone. However, remembering the conditions of the duel, the Ruan nevertheless gave him a slit. The opponent flew off in the same way as Mikal once flew away. The arena for a moment froze in shock and then exploded with applause. Even Terran hung for a moment. He, a man at the stage of the demigod, but had never seen such magic before. He became extremely curious who this boy is. The king wanted to ask the head of the Ignant Academy, but he refused to disclose the information. As a result, the formidable king said that he himself would call the Ruan for a personal conversation. However, the head of the academy recalled that magicians have the right to keep their techniques secretly. This was part. In honor of the victory in group and individual competitions, the Ruan team arranged a congratulation evening. As a presentation, Jason offered the Ruan a local coconut vanilla cocktail. The drink was called the Dragon Kiss and strengthened emotions. In the midst of the holiday, Set Malkiri unexpectedly approached them. Jason immediately strained, deciding that he had come with poor intentions. However, Seth was not going to arrange a scandal. He came to ask for forgiveness for his behavior. Recognizing his mistakes, the guy realized that he should not humiliate others. Already about to leave, Seth heard an unexpected offer. Ruan, showing kindness, inviting him to the table. As a result, they were so amused that everything grew into a real booze. The next morning, Ruan was surrounded by ridicule. Because of that drink, it became very emotional. It was a little embarrassing, especially when he met a Set in the corridor. Now Seth considered him the best friend that looked rather strange. But unexpectedly, Professor Hadel appeared on the corridor. He said that the insidious king wants to see the Ruan personally. The teacher warned that the meeting would be difficult. Ruan told about this to his team, and everyone was amazed. However, they had another test ahead. It was an arrow ball, a task in which you need to throw an arrow aface into the gate. It was necessary to use magic and strategy to win. It was decided that the Ruan would divert the attention of the entire team of rivals. Meanwhile, his allies will focus on an exact hit. Everyone agreed with this tactics, and the time has come to the match. Ruan rushed forward, attracting the attention of opponents. They tried to stop him with spells, but unsuccessfully. Even Seth now supported him from the stands. Ruan showed incredible power in close combat, literally taking all the responsibility of himself. His team was not at a loss and skillfully took advantage of the opportunity. Ignat's players acted harmoniously, revealing the weaknesses of the enemy and demonstrating the upper class. The result was a stunning score 11-0. The opponents were so demoralized that they simply gave up without waiting for the final whistle. It was an unconditional victory. After the match, Ruan was met by Professor Hadel. He said that in the evening, he was waiting for a meeting with King Teron, accompanied by the head of the academy. The time has come for dinner, and Ruan went to the meeting. The countries immediately felt the ominous manna enveloping the place, which was very alerted. As soon as the Ruan crouched, the king spoke, hinting that he has been watching him for a long time and knows very well who he was. Without wasting time, Theron began to ask how the guy managed to reach such a level in such a short time. Naturally, the boy was not going to reveal his secrets and only mentioned that the whole thing was in his zealous training. The king did not retreat, clarifying exactly what efforts he made. Ruan spoke about his study of the art of the body, but it was clear that he was concealing something. Nevertheless, Teron realized that it would not be possible to squeeze more information, and simply stated that he would closely observe him. In Ruan, this caused only even greater motivation. We can say a kind of challenge. The next morning, Terion and Teron again discussed the past dinner. The Dirty King was clearly impressed. He noted that the Ruans were not just a daring youth, but the most stubborn and impudent of all he met. Other students would have long been inclined in front of him, and this guy not only did not show fear, but boldly held on equal terms. Meanwhile, the Prime Duma had a completely different conversation. One of the team members ran up to him and said that Tyron was interested in Ruan. This news shocked him. He always considered himself the best, the only one who deserves the attention of such a person. And now some kind of guy from Ignat distracts his mentor? In a rage, he rushed along the corridor, thinking how this could happen. His anger was in full swing, and he went directly to the Ruan. Without hiding irritation, Duma sharply asked what he was talking about with the Dirty King. But Ruan only looked at him calmly and answered with a grin that he was not going to reveal the details to him. Duma clearly did not suit this answer. The situation was heated, and at some point the thoughts even grabbed the sword, as if he was ready to fight right here and now. The Ruan also did not stand aside. He prepared for battle, realizing that the confrontation could become inevitable. It seemed another second and they would cross the weapon, but Irene Prius unexpectedly intervened. Her intervention translated everything into a kind of joke, and as a result, thoughts casting the last displeased look just left. Ruan asked Irene whether Duma always behaved so nervously. The girl grinned and explained that usually from the Duma, you can't stretch out the word, but this case is special. He was furious due to the fact that the Ruans attracted the attention of the formidable king. Individual meetings with him, a rarity, which means the Ruan turned out to be a worthy opponent. Irin, with curiosity, asked if he was really ready to fight the Duma. The Ruan replied that no, because I did not want to be disqualified, and the dumb most likely simply tried to intimidate it. The girl giggled, called him strange, and retired. Soon another group battle took place, but Ignat unfortunately did not win. Everyone was upset, but Ruan reassured while thinking about individual competitions. The next test turned out to be even more difficult. It was an individual battle for survival. All main representatives of 32 schools will be planted on the island where they have to fight. The winner will receive 32 points, and the one who will fly first is only one. The defeated participants are instantly teleported back, and the island itself will become more dangerous over time. Such a test could radically change the ratings. Everyone understood that it would determine real leaders. Jason advised him to start preparing, because all the participants began to create alliances. Ruan thought with whom he should unite. Irene came to my mind, but there was no confidence that she would agree. Suddenly, Seth ran to him and offered to unite. Ryan realized that he had completely forgotten about him, and quickly agreed. Together they went to Irene to invite her to the team, but everyone said that the girl refused everyone. When they came up, the girl only smiled and said that it was Ruan who was waiting. This sounded a little unexpected, even with a shade of romance. They began to discuss the plan, because the most dangerous alliance was a detachment of 14 people led by Dalian Mulkin. This magician was a genius and invariably entered the 5 best, specializing in holy magic. Ruan, however, was more worried about thoughts. It was this duel that could become decisive. When they were planted on the island, it immediately became clear that it would not be easy to survive here. The participants ran into their groups, took up positions, and a huge barrier appeared above the island, which gradually narrowed until he was too close, but there was little time left, and the best territory had to be occupied. After a long movement, Seth began to complain that he wanted to eat. However, now there was no time for food. Suddenly explosions were heard in the distance. The battles have already begun. Soon their group ran into another alliance. Seth immediately smelled food, and he was the first to rush into the attack. Irene followed him. Opponents tried to block them. Although the enemies were strong, the Ruans were incredibly fast. He dodged all attacks and inflicted a decisive blow to explosive mana. The battle ended in his favor. Having dealt with the opponents, they examined the supplies and were pleasantly surprised. The food turned out to be enough to hold out for several days. Hunger no longer threatened, and the team felt confident. Suddenly, a new explosion rang out in the distance. Everyone immediately thought that this was the work of an alliance of 14 people, but Irene expressed another opinion. She was sure that the Duma Prime was behind this. They decided to find a shelter and stumbled upon a small house that could become a temporary shelter. Seth immediately wanted to cook a steak, but he was abruptly stopped. If you light a fire, the smell of meat will instantly give their location, and then the battle will be inevitable. Everyone began to notice that Ruan somehow guesses the development of events. He predicted things that then came true, and this raised questions. Ruan explained that everything is much simpler than it seems, because on the map you can predict where people will be. The central settlement is the only place that can accommodate a large number of participants. It is there that the group of Dalian and Duma will most likely go. This was the most logical step, and if his assumption is true, then soon. But Irene did not believe that the Duma Prime would go to the central settlement. It seemed illogical. Going alone on a crowd of magicians was suicide. However, the Ruans considered otherwise. It was the best way to hunt alone, earning points for eliminating opponents. This style was fully consistent with the character of the Duma. Moreover, he suggested that Prime does this for a reason. Most likely, his true goal is to attract the attention of the formidable king. After the discussion, the team decided to establish duty. Irene was the first to follow the camp. At the end of the night, she woke the Ruan. The enemy penetrated their territory. They hid so as not to give out their presence, and watched as the stranger carefully makes his way to the house. As soon as he crossed the threshold, the Ruans instantly immobilized him. It turned out that it was a representative of the Academy column Callus. He was scared and immediately began to make excuses. When he was asked if he had allies, he answered negatively. Then Seta specified that he remembers about 6 of his allies. However, his voice trembled when he mentioned one name, Duma Prime. The guy began to tell that in the beginning they felt confident, but suddenly a thought appeared. He attacked them first, provoking chaos, and this attracted the attention of the group of Dalian Malkin, which was nearby. There were only 2 survivors, Colum and his partner. True, when they tried to escape, thoughts appeared in front of them again. After that, he disappeared into the bushes, hiding in anticipation of the final blow. The Ruans were impressed with the thoughtfulness of his tactics, because he skillfully used opponents against each other. achieving the maximum result with minimal efforts. Column, realizing that he had no chance to survive alone, asked to join their alliance. Irene and Set looked at each other, thinking about it, but the Ruin refused without hesitation. They were surprised by his determination, but Ruan had no doubt. He asked the column one single question, how the guy was Zebei from the Duma, and he could not give a clear answer. This was impossible. Duma would not leave anyone alive. Either he is lying or something more is hiding behind this. Ruan activated the player's eye, but he found nothing. This meant only one thing. A puppet stood in front of them. Without losing a second, the Ruins with lightning speed destroyed him. This meant that they needed to leave immediately. After a while, the sky was already bright when they continued the path. While moving, they analyzed the situation. Carrying thought who threw them a puppet. There were many suspects, but one stood out among the rest. Koherki is the best student of the Magic College, a specialist in the creation of puppets and potions. And most importantly, he was in the alliance of Dali and Malkin. This meant that soon all teams would begin to hunt for their three. Remembering the narrowing barrier, they realized that the western part of the island would soon become inaccessible. At this moment, Irin recalled the old proverb that the pirate should be used to fight the pirates. Asterisk. They have a plan. Meanwhile, in the largest alliance, the Ruin team was discussed. They were sure that they had almost caught them, but at the last moment everything went wrong. Now their goal was clear, to grab these three, whatever it costs them. However, no one was sure that they would go to the western base. Having decided to check this, they moved west and soon noticed a powerful emission of mana. The first thought was that this is the Ruins and his team fighting, which means that you can come and take your glasses. However, going closer, they realized that they were ambushed. But it was too late. Ruan, Irene, and Seda, hiding on the branches, watched what was happening. Soon they also decided to join the battle to earn points. The Dalian team suddenly joined them, and for a while they became part of the alliance. There were only 3 of them, so the temporary union was a logical step. But then thought appeared. To the surprise of everyone, he also acted with them. It seemed that he was only waiting for a convenient moment to get rid of everyone else, and then get to the main one. Everyone understood that pure insanity to fight against the strongest participant in the battle, however, instead of fleeing, they decided to unite and fight back. With the help of refracting time and earthquake of ruins, he was able to dispel some opponents. In the midst of the battle of thoughts, he met with Ruan and, grinning, promised to deal with him personally. After these words, he just left. Meanwhile, lists of finalists began to form in the room of the organizers. Everything turned out as expected, but some unexpected names still caused surprise. Terion remembered how Ruan promised to prove that he was better than all the students selected by the king. Now he was really interested in watching this guy, and he can find out if he could defeat the Duma. Having decided to rest, the team stopped at the base B, which was near the central island. At this moment, the Ruan managed to complete one of his tasks. Irene finally woke up and Seta took up cooking. The meat turned out so tasty that they even forgot about everything else. At the meal, the couple began to discuss the future. However, no one knew what was waiting for him. Irene admitted that she has one incomplete goal. It is to defeat Prime. For her, it was like an unfinished homework. By evening, the barrier continued to narrow. This meant that it was no longer possible to stay here. The only option was the central base where the village was. But there, probably, they were already Dalian and Shoshiri. There was no confidence that the thoughts would also be there. However, he attracted too much attention, and each of his steps now had a meaning. The situation became critical. Even promotion to 1 rank could bring huge glasses. Any mistake could be victory. Their goal was clear: to find the Duma of Prime. Using his abilities, Ruan determined its location. But instead of battle, he only led the enemy to his allies. Ruan remembered Irene's goal and invited her to fight Prime. Duma only mockingly grinned. He stated that she was too insignificant to become his worthy opponent. In his eyes, she did not pose a threat. But Irene was full of determination. Even if there was little chance, she was not going to retreat. The girl first rushed to the attack using a blizzard, but the thoughts easily stopped her. The next moment, he grabbed the sword, and she realized that she would not have time to dodge. At the last moment, Ruan came to the rescue. He promised not to intervene, but could not allow his comrade to simply cross out from the game. Now the battle moved to the format 1-on-1. Ruan has already managed to notice Irene's mistakes and made conclusions. He was taught that in a battle with a swordsman, you need to look at his feet, because it is from them that the power of impact comes. Realizing this, he entered into a fight, but the thoughts were too fast. Soon he outwitted the Ruan and inflicted his wound to him. Prime grinned and said that the Ruan perceives the battle incorrectly, but this only spurred the Ruan. Usually his tactics was to attack at the moment when the opponent was not ready. However, Thoughts had too much advantage because his sword was a legendary weapon. When Ruan tried to change his position, he felt a sharp pain in the wound. It was a curse of radiance. Each of his steps caused suffering, and soon he could even lose the opportunity to move. Prime used the natural magic of the 5th grade of Titan's wings. He soared into the air, preparing to deliver a final blow. Ruan managed to hide and bandage the wound. At that moment, he remembered the ring of the fight. There was determination in his eyes, and he had a plan. Using the fury of the fence, he jumped right on the enemy. Duma, seeing the attack, raised his sword, using it as a shield. At that moment, the Ruan set up the ring of the fight, and it worked. There was a sonorous crunch, and Prime's sword cracked and crumbled into pieces. Duma recoiled, having been injured, and fell to the ground. Ruan won. Seth watched this battle and could not hide the delight. But turning to Irene, Ruan saw her with a drooping face. He apologized to her for intervening. She only shook her head and admitted that she was guilty. Her desire to defeat the Duma blinded her, and in the end she emanated danger. Now she didn't have the same goal. But then she looked at the Ruan and firmly declared, "He's her new goal." In total, only 5 participants remain on the island. Their team quickly figured out the remaining 2, after which the final moment came. Irene immediately announced that she was surrendering. She was not able to continue the battle. Now only Ruans and Set remained. Seth was not going to concede just like that. But as soon as the battle began, Ruan knocked him into one blow. The Igun team congratulated its winner. Even Irene and Seta joined the celebration. Ruan understood that he became a winner. Duma, although he scored a lot of points, fell strongly in the ranking. Other participants also sank below. Now Ruan was going to continue this path so as not to lose its place at the top. Meanwhile, Jason was in euphoria. He was sitting at the same table with Irene Prius and was ready to worship her, enjoying every moment of communication. But Duma realized his defeat. He underestimated the Ruan and could not predict his actions. He was especially painful from the fact that the formidable king saw his loss. The guy asked his assistant if he was looking for Terran, but there was no answer. Meanwhile, Tyrion was delighted with how Ruan proved himself. He did not expect that he would be able to defeat the Duma. But Theron was disappointed but not depressed. Of course, he did not rejoice at the defeat of his students, but interest in the Ruan only increased. The great festival was drawing to an end. Several days have passed since the end of the battle for survival, and in group competitions, the Academy Igun took the 4th place. There was a final match among the main representatives, and the meaning of the test was to go on horseback on the called beast. The distance was divided into 3 stages. This is light athletics, martial arts, and magic testing. The final battle was supposed to begin, and Seta asked what the Ruan was feeling, hearing the crowd chanting his name. He only grinned. Of course he enjoyed this, but so far he could not afford to relax, because he had not yet won completely. While Prime is not defeated, it is early to triumph. The final stage was announced, and soon there was a shot signaling the start. The participants called on their magic animals one by one, activating all kinds of spells. Everyone rushed forward, but the Ruans suddenly remained standing still. The audience looked at each other in bewilderment and wondered what the guy planned. Meanwhile, most of the participants have already overcome a considerable distance. By the way, Dalian Malkin proposed Irene an alliance, but she refused. Suddenly, Duma Prime appeared, the guy easily dealing with magic beasts. He looked around the battlefield, but did not notice the Ruan anywhere. It alerted him. The boy went to Irene and asked where her friend was, but even she did not know the answer. At that moment, Ruan's voice rang out. Everyone turned around. Ruan calmly caught up with them, without even looking tired. Surprised participants asked where the rest were. He just shrugged and replied that there were no others. Then his tactics revealed. Unlike the rest, he went the last to see all opponents and eliminate them one after another. His strength, this is a close battle, which means he could not allow someone to attack him from the back. At first he waited methodically, then he began to count the defeated. He reached the 24th and then stopped counting. Set, despite his friendship, he also eliminated without hesitation. Now Duma was ready to fight him, but there were several more participants in front who had to be circumvented. He did not lose time and rushed forward. The next zone was a labyrinth of traps. Once treasure was stored here, but now it has become part of the competition. To go through it, It was necessary either to use spells to neutralize traps or find another way. But magic spells needed time, and it was dangerous to stand still. Ruan decided to act differently. Using the player's eye, he began to scan the wall to weaknesses. After a few moments, I found the desired point. Irene and one of the participants only exchanged skeptical views. After all, it is impossible to break through such a wall with bare hands. But the Ruans did not even hesitate. He inflicted a powerful blow, and the stones scattered. He created a new path through a maze, which caused everyone a considerable shock. Duma, however, was not going to waste time on the destruction of the walls. He walked through the traps in the forehead, even with an arrow sticking out of the shoulder. This country seemed madness, but given the limited time of the action of spells, such tactics made sense. At the next stage, it was necessary to cross a water obstacle. Ruan had an advantage in speed thanks to the refraction of time, but Prime also did not lose time. When they fell into the water together, he froze the surface of the water and rushed at full speed on his ice horse. Ruan was not going to lag behind. Using fiery magic, he melted the ice in front of him and broke forward. There was already a finished stadium ahead, and suddenly the Ruan smiled because he had an idea. He suggested Prime revenge. He only twisted because he understood that he was not in form now. The crowd froze because no one could say who would win. Soon the image appeared on the screens. Everyone saw Ruan standing on their feet in front of a fallen rival. The victory was obvious. The crowd rejoiced, and the Ruan stood on the rostrum, and Irene and Duma next to him. The great festival has officially ended. He was called the Next Generation Magician. He proved to everyone, including himself, which could achieve greatness. In honor of the triumph, a ball was organized, where all the nobles gathered. Ruan, however, was not delighted. He dreamed of returning to the academy as soon as possible. But then he saw Irene. She looked incredibly beautiful in an elegant dress. She was surprised by how much no one is in a hurry to speak with Ruan. She believed that they did not know how to approach a person who stands above everyone else. But this was not the only reason for the strange behavior of others. It turned out that some powerful became interested in Ruan, and so much that even the nobles were afraid to discuss it aloud. In general, an evening banquet came, where representatives of all 32 academies gathered at the same table. A dirty king should sit in the center of the hall. However, another empty place remained next to him. Soon everything became clear. A dirty king and a crown prince entered the hall. Thatron spoke first. He did not hide his disappointment. In the presence of all guests, a man humiliated his students, calling them a shame. It was obvious that he uses Ruan as opposition to him, emphasizing his superiority. Ruan did not suit it. The attention of the guy gathered attracted Summertan Rhynak, who did not take his eyes off him. Thatron turned to the guy directly, asking how he feels after the victory. The Ruan answered Teron honestly that he does not like when his success is used to humiliate others. Irene immediately tried to stop him, but it was too late. Ruan continued that other students also deserve respect, and they cannot be considered worse only because of the defeat. Thatron only grinned. He warned that such honesty could turn into hatred for himself. There was a laughter. The godly son of the dirty king laughed loudly and noticed with interest that the Ruans dared to snap. This caused a stir in the hall. Iren exhaled softly and the tension in the air slept. The evening came to an end. However, suddenly the crown prince invited the Ruan to drink tea. It was an invitation that cannot be abandoned. Ruan felt that there was something more behind this and was right. The prince did not walk around the booth, and right in his forehead he invited the guy to work for him. He promised to transfer him to the best educational institution, to give everything he wishes. But in return, the Ruans had to change citizenship. Ruan did not understand why it was he who was near so many talented boys. However, the Empire already had enough talented magicians. But Crown Prince explained that his godfather spoke precisely about the Ruan. The guy paused and then honestly refused. It would be a logical choice to take a powerful patron, because almost every magician seeks to enlist the support of the powerful world. But Ruan did not want to become someone else's weapon. He had not yet recognized everything that this world could offer, and was not going to fetter himself with oaths. Crown Prince asked if he would regret it. Ruan only shrugged and of course understood that this could happen. Then the prince suggested forgetting this conversation. After the guy departed to himself, he said that he received everything he wants. Ruan is a gem and he loves to collect rare stones. After a while, Ruan trained, and the countries noticed the excellent form of the guy. But the boy did not really like what the man says about this. And then the country said that she is a woman. It is so unique that such an incarnation as it is gender. By the way, they even took a bath together. But it is not the point. The Ruan remained a little time, and it was all ready to say goodbye to friends. Soon the magician approached him, saying that by tradition, the winner should complete all minor obligations. A mysterious man called himself a street cat was appointed as an accompanying person. Ruan tried to check it with the help of the player's eyes, but no information appeared, which was very surprised. The next destination, the Imperial Palace, where it was waiting for an official congratulation and the choice of an artifact. Obtaining the relic was mandatory, and if lucky, it was possible to get something truly powerful. In addition, he was to choose a mission. Usually, students were not allowed to take tasks, but for the winner of the great festival, they made an exception. The Ruan received a list of available missions from which he could choose any. Countries noticed one task that interested him, but more on that later. Arriving at the Peon Palace, Ruan immediately met the Kronprint, who handed him 10,000 gold as a prize for victory. Then he was expected by a meeting with the Master of the Tower, who was supposed to confirm his choice of mission. And Ruan chose the most difficult task from the list. When he entered the hall, he was waiting for a dirty king. This task was considered almost impossible, and it was warned about it. It was connected with the Heavenly Mountain, the birthplace of Kingram, and, according to legends, the fight lived in this place for about 100 years. Previously, the Ogre lived there, but most of them died in the Great War. Now this territory seemed deserted and lifeless. However, access there was blocked by a magic barrier that no one could overcome. Many tried to unravel the spell hiding the passage, but to no avail. Theron was wary when he found out that Ruan chose this particular mission. He asked why the boy decided to go there. The guy replied that he was attracted by the difficulty of the test, but the king did not believe. He suggested changing the task if the matter is only in finding a call. If the Ruans really can solve the secret, he will either go down in history or become the first to fail. Thatron clearly suspected something, and suggested that Ruan has a hidden force associated with this place and decided to observe his actions. After the conversation, the guy began to doubt whether he would cope with the test. But the countries were sure that he would succeed, because his abilities are superior to human limits. Later, another man came up to him, accompanied by a street cat. He introduced himself as a boar, which seemed strange, but they explained to him that everyone had their own forms. The day came when the Ruan was to enter the artifact room to choose his own relic. Artifacts were stored in 4 zones. The Zone X was the most mysterious. There were rare and powerful relics. The Ruan was led through the rest of the zones, but he was not allowed to enter the X zone. Access there was possible only under special circumstances. Even the Emperor had no right to enter there without permission. This fact intrigued the Ruan even more. The halls of artifacts were filled with powerful relics of swords, books, ancient treasures of knowledge. There were magic books in the Zone A that could be studied, but it was forbidden to endure the hall. Zone B was a place where the greatest artifacts of knowledge were stored. However, none of them chose Ruan. He asked the accompanying if there were such cases earlier. It turned out that yes, but very rarely. The very entering the zone was already considered a sign of exceptional abilities, because not every magician was honored with such an honor. But Ruan was interested in another Zone X. Countries suddenly froze sharply and breathed the air. He felt in this place an incredibly rare smell of aroma that could come only from a real dragon. And at that moment something incredible happened. After 56 years of silence, the X zone opened. This was immediately informed of the Dirty King, who was in shock. One of the 3 artifacts reacted to the Ruan. It was Cunan's Tooth, the most mysterious artifact. Only 3 artifacts were stored in the X zone. Algul's staff is a symbol of power of the first magician of mankind, enhancing the magical power of the owner. It was this artifact that Terion chose 56 years ago. Morshi armor, an absolute protection artifact, which themselves choose the one to serve. Kunhan Tooth, an ancient artifact who has not chosen the owner for several hundred years. But today he chose Ruan. The tooth was so heavy that even 6 adult men could hardly raise it. But Ruan raised him with one hand, as if it had not weighed anything, as if he had the power of the fence itself. Theron ordered all the magic magicians to call. After short thoughts, the guy took this artifact and decided to immediately go to the west to be closer to Heavenly Mountain. He had 1 month to fulfill the mission. His accompanying street cat enjoyed him that everything should be questioned. On his way, the first point was the Teshirin Castle, the nearest city to Heavenly Mountain. This castle was built to protect against ogres which once terrified these lands. But when Ruan arrived there, he found a completely different picture. Local men drank in the middle of the day, not caring about anything. This was explained by the fact that there was no one else to defend because the Ogre has long disappeared. Well, in any case, the Ruan went to the stable intending to take the horse. However, it turned out that there were no horses left in the city. It was strange because they said that they had already taken them all away, and who would need all the horses in such a town? Countries felt something strange at the beginning of the journey. The Ruans realized that they were being watched from the very beginning of the path. Having decided to get rid of the pursuers, the Ruans bribed the hotel administrator, asking him not to issue information about him to anyone. Then he went for a walk to create the appearance that he had left the city. When he returned to the hotel, they told him that no one came. But there was one strange circumstance. The administrator disappeared for 3 minutes. Ruan immediately realized that this was the magic of the 6th grade, which means that his opponent was a very dangerous magician. In his room, he found a note from those very people. It said that they did not want evil to him, but simply observed. But for the Ruan, it sounded like a threat. The guy went in search of mysterious pursuers. Using the map, he tracked their movement. But they quickly realized that he started the game and was trying to lure them in an open place. They were going to catch up with him, but suddenly the trace of the young man broke off. Before they could understand what was happening, he attacked the first. Having eliminated 2 with lightning speed, he was left alone with their leader. He only laughed. After he called the Ruan to the real monster, he disappeared, as if dissolved in the air. The guy examined the defeated and noticed the mysterious tattoos on their neck. Countries immediately recognized them. It was a sign of a vicious circle. These people were part of a secret organization, known for dirty and dangerous affairs. No one knew much about them except the pattern on the body. The Ruans thought they seemed weaker to him than the opponents with whom he fought at the great festival. But one managed to penetrate the consciousness of the hotel administrator. This meant that the man was much more dangerous than the rest. Ruan, as always, developed a strategy. He was going to force the last spy to appear himself. The next day, the guy went to the Heavenly Mountain. The road was long and monotonous, but when it approached the target, his circle of power began to vibrate. This meant that he arrived in the right place. Everyone knew the legend that a fight once lived here. But much more important was the barrier that no one could overcome. As if he knew something and prompted a guy. This barrier could not destroy an ordinary person, but what about the ogres? People believed that they died out after the war, but the countries doubted this. Ruan put his palm on the barrier and turned to them. He told the Kunhan Tooth and asked to open the door, and suddenly the barrier began to collapse. But the same man appeared behind him who followed him. Although before he managed to do anything, Ruan turned around and hit him with his fist. The earth shuddered from the blow. Since it was a trap, a guy tied a man. And then a real OGR came out. With a huge club, he smeared it, tied with one blow. Then he turned to the Ruan and asked who he was. Countries warned the guy to be careful because they have animal instincts. But the Ruan was not threatened. Ogre saw Kunhan's tooth and led him inside the barrier. The world around was completely different. Ruan found himself in a different dimension. The rest of the Ogre looked at him in bewilderment and did not understand what a person was doing here. But something in him was different. They felt it. The countries whispered to the Ruan that, most likely, they would not touch him while he wears Kunhan's tooth. The Ogre led the guy to the top of the mountain, where their leader, Chieftain Harhan, was located. Harhan was silent for a long time and then asked if he had Kunhan's tooth. Ruan nodded. The leader looked at him, pondering what to do. He had not yet decided to kill the young man or feed the beasts. No one believed that the artifact could choose it. But Ruan showed a tooth in front of them. Then the guy was asked directly who he is. Ruan decided not to pull and asked if they know the name of Dracagonia. The leader was shocked that he generally knows this name. Ruan struck him even more when he said that he owned information from Kingram, and Harhan rose to his full height and roared in surprise that his friend was alive. The guy replied that he is now an artifact and works as a professor. A long pause came, but one of them suddenly stepped forward and said that his best friend was his professor. Ogre no longer wanted to kill him. Now they wanted to test his strength. The Ruan was sent to the arena, and this was only the beginning of the test. The guy had to go through a rite of initiation in order to win the recognition of the ogres. The only way to prove your strength, competition in arm wrestling, he had to fight with Omerus, the son of Omerukan, the son of the leader. This OGR was gigantic and incredibly strong. and most of the ogres expected that he would tear a person into pieces. Ruan understood that the forces were not comparable, and even asked the country if they would kill him in case of defeat. But the countries only shrugged. It remained a mystery. Despite the fears, Ruan knew that Kunhan's tooth gave him plus 1,000 to force. Although the difference between him and an ordinary person was huge, Omarush was also not an ordinary creature. The fight began. The Ruan was struggling, but was defeated. Although he put all his power, his strength was not enough to defeat the giant. But the most amazing was not a defeat, but how long he managed to hold out. For the Ogre, it was unprecedented. Any other person would lose instantly, and he gained respect. Ruan received a new task, win in arm wrestling. In honor of its resistance, a large feast was arranged, where they served incredibly tasty food. By the way, countries had no doubt that the Ruans would survive, but watched him to see his reaction. But even among the fun of the Ruan did not leave the question of why these creatures closed themselves from the outside world. Later, Omarush came up to him, calling him a strong man, and asked what he was going to do with the tooth of their first leader. The guy did not even suspect that something could be created from him. Ruan thought before that how best to use Kunhan's tooth. Unlike the staff of Algal or the armor of Morshi, he did not have an obvious purpose. He was thinking of turning him into a mace, but countries advised to leave these thoughts for later. And here it turns out with him it was possible to do something more interesting. Kunhan's tooth was incredibly solid, and few could process it. But for such a skilled blacksmith as Omarush, this was not a problem. He asked Ruan if he had a concrete idea because he could create anything. Ruan flashed with enthusiasm. Half a month has passed since his arrival on the Heavenly Mountain. He helped Ogre on the hunt, performed daily training, and of course did not stop fighting in arm wrestling. By that time, his track record included 15 legions in a row. This angered him, but Omarush noted that the guy's power is growing, and he begins to understand how to manage it. But the main goal was Omarusha before leaving the village. A few days later, the Ruan finally managed to do this. The face of the fence at that moment is worth seeing. After a surprised pause, Omarush first called him by name and admitted that he is now worthy of his weapon. These were Kunhan tooth gloves. Wearing them, the Ruans received plus 2,000 to force and a new skill of the will of the leader. Feeling a surge of power, Ruan decided to arrange a test. He gathered all the soldiers of the Heavenly Mountain and called them to the arm wrestling. Ogre enthusiastically accepted the challenge. The countries noted that the fight also loved such competitions. Over 30 years of life among ogres, he was able to defeat only 17 rivals in a row. Ruan felt incredible power in himself and was sure that he would not lose a single time. In any case, the experiment was conducted. But it's time to leave. He said goodbye to the inhabitants of the village who thanked him for the time and shook his hand in respect. The Dirty King did not receive any news of the Ruan for a long time. No matter how much I tried to find out something, there were no results. The only thing he saw 2 magicians with heavy injuries, but their commander never appeared. Soon the assistant approached him and said that Ruan had arrived in Ruvadan. He was immediately called to the chapter. During the interrogation, Ruan lied, claiming that he had failed the mission. He was not going to give out the secret of Ogrov. The Dirty King did not believe him saying that the guy was lying badly. For a person with such an artifact, the failure looked suspicious, but he did not press. Instead, he asked what exactly the Ruans saw on the mountain, hinting at the Ogrov. The guy knew that he could penetrate his mind, but would not do this because of his status. As a result, he was released, but he felt that they would continue to follow him. Returning to the hostel, he was littered with congratulations. Although 2 months have passed since his departure, he was still considered a hero. Among the letters were invitations from noble people, including from princes of different kingdoms. Jason, sitting nearby, asked how Ruan was going to spend the holidays. The guy replied not as usual. He did not return to Ardell for too long, considering himself too weak and unworthy. But now he had no reason to avoid his hometown. When the young man arrived home, the locals were struck by his appearance. Soon a younger sister ran up to him, who grew up a lot but remained as sweet. Father, hearing about his return, convened the whole family. They had something to talk about. Ruan told about everything, just silent about the player's eye. The relatives were shocked by his strength, victories, and how many tests he passed. At that moment, Baggins, an assistant to his father, wanted to say something, but his father tried to stop him. However, Ruan insisted on hearing the truth. It turned out that after his son became famous, many letters came to Ardell. Of course, everyone was rejected, but one problem became clear. Pilos Monzo, the head of the Monzo trading city, began to exert pressure. Monzo played a key role in the economy of Ardell, since most of the goods were sold through it. Picos threatened that if the Ruan does not become the magician of their city, he will reduce financing and limit supply. This could destroy the economy of Ardell, and the state's money began to end. The Ruans were very upset. He decided to personally go to Manzo to meet with Picos. Before leaving, his father's assistant handed him supplies on the road, and in the moment it turned out that Ardell also survived at the expense of personal funds of the head of the city. Ordinary residents did not know about real problems, and this news was even more upset by the Ruan. He did not understand why his father hid it. As a result, the guy handed Baggins a box with 10,000 gold. This money was supposed to go to the development of the city. He wanted Ardell to become self-sufficient and not depend on external factors. In addition, the guy ordered to expand the territory of the city. Having solved all the issues, Ruan went to Manzo. Having reached the city, he immediately headed for the Picos estate. There were many rumors about the man himself, and he was known as a skilled manipulator. When the guy came, the guards at the gate, hearing the surname of the Ruan, they reacted as if he were some kind of rabble. They remembered his father, who often visited here but did not enjoy respect. The Ruans became very angry because of this and applied force. When Landlord himself appeared, the man pretended to be madly happy to meet. Bowing in a bow, he greeted Ruan with a smile, calling him the next generation magician. Ruan, in response, sarcastically replied that he could not raise his head at all if he was so embarrassed by his visit. He immediately pointed out to Pilco that his guards behave inappropriately and that they would be better to educate. For clarity, he hit one of the guards, showing his strength again. Pilcos was silent, although it was clear that he was furious. Inside the estate, the Ruans noticed a frightening collection of stuffed animals. He refused to drink tea, suspecting the catch, although the Lord assured the reverse. But when the conversation came about the purpose of the visit, the mask of the kind owner flew. Landlord began to speak openly and without pretense at the time, where Ruan stated that the man was obliged to return the price back. He stated that the rustican, like the Ruan, should be kneeling in front of him. After that, the Lord ordered his knights to kill him. Picos was going to turn the Ruan into a new exhibit of his collection, but he miscalculated. Ruan easily coped with the opponents, activating the will of the leader, which intensified with the help of Kunhan toothgloves. With a blow, he sent one of the knights to the crowd of the rest, causing a complete chaos. The building smashed when he used explosive mana. Panic covered when the expensive collection of the Lord turned into ashes. Pilcos himself, in fear, fell to his knees, and the Ruans forced him to pay compensation in tenfold. In addition, he forced him to increase prices for goods, solving the problem of Ardell. After that, he returned home, but there was an unexpected meeting there. On the threshold stood Irene. Once, even during the banquet in honor of the end of the festival, she promised the Ruan that one day she would visit his homeland. And now she kept her word. Father was glad to meet, but the younger sister clearly began to be jealous of his brother. At the table, he was immediately filled up with questions whether he was his lover. But the conversation quickly moved to more important matters. Irin went to inspect the surroundings with the Ruan, and Ruan was left alone with his father. He again asked the question whether Irerin was not his girlfriend. However, then their conversation acquired a business character. Baggins entered the office with the box that the Ruans handed over earlier. Father tried to return his money to the Ruan, but his son began to refuse. He considered them investing in Ardell, not his property. True, the guy told his father about what he knew, how he was donated personal funds to maintain the city, and now this money could not be restored. Of course, the chapter did not like that Baggins told about this without his permission. As a result, he showed the Ruan of 3,600 gold, which were a stitch, and the chapter believed that this was enough. But for the Ruan, it was not clear how to abandon the amount, which was 3 times more, and Baggins also did not understand such stubbornness. When the guy went outside, he saw Irene and his sister walked, holding hands. He called Irene a sister, which surprised her. The girl said that the guy was very lucky with her sister. During the walk, Irin shared her impressions of the city, but seeing his thoughtfulness, she asked what he was thinking about. Ruan admitted that he wants to engage in the development of his homeland, but does not know where to start. This answer touched her slightly. She went such a long way, and he could not even stop thinking about business. To make amends, the guy began to ask how the girl got. It turned out that she reached in just 2 days, choosing the route through the southern mountains. This fact was struck by the Ruan. The southern mountains were considered impassable due to many monsters and evil spirits. But if Irene was able to cross them, then there was an opportunity to lay a trade path there. This idea was a breakthrough. If you establish trade relations with the city of Aitlek, Ardell could become an independent territory. Inspired by this, Ruan thanked Irene for his help and immediately went to his father. However, his enthusiasm was quickly cooled. The father explained that he was already trying to realize this idea, but 8 trading guilds refused to cooperate. They did not believe that Ardell could benefit them. Baggins confirmed that this issue has long been discussed, but always came to a dead end. Ruan was not going to give up. One refusal is not a reason to abandon the idea. Now he had the status of the winner of the great festival, and he hoped that his proposal would be perceived differently. The father did not see the reasons for this and allowed him to take the business into his own hands. When Ruan left the house, he met Irene again. She admitted that she crossed the border of Ardell illegally, but now it did not matter. Since it happened, she was ready to accompany him to Aitlek. The path turned out to be difficult, even despite their strength and skills. They had to face many difficulties, but Ruan did not really care about such details. During the trip, they stumbled upon the den of the werewolves. The battle was inevitable, and they were seriously dangerous. However, finding the main werewolf and destroying it, they forced the rest to escape. After that, the Ruans received a task and a reward, the mane of a silver werewolf. Now he had to find the one who really needed it. A few days later, they finally reached their destination. The security at the entrance clarified whether they had a meeting, but Ruan simply called his name, after which he was immediately missed. Once in the Golden Hall, the guy immediately paid attention to the magnificent figures of gold that decorated the room. The whole situation was saturated with the spirit of luxury. However, he reminded himself that he arrived here not to admire the interiors, but to solve important issues. When he entered the main hall, he was met by 8 representatives, who, to his surprise, called him an ostentatious guest. He did not even assume that the victory at the festival gives such a status here. Without unnecessary introductions, he announced that he had arrived to discuss trade relations between Ardell and Aitlek. There was tense silence in the hall. The countries immediately noticed how the representatives frowned, clearly dissatisfied with this issue. They began to shut down, trying to remember what Ardell was generally. Someone mentioned that this is a small land in the south of the Kingdom of Radian, known for fish and potatoes. They also remembered that earlier the father of Ruan was already trying to conclude a deal, but they refused him, because it was obvious that this union did not seem profitable to them. Finally, one of the senior representatives said that there was nothing to discuss here. Ruan understood that they saw in him only a small future lord trying to get their money. But he was not going to retreat. The guy firmly demanded to listen to him to the end. Then he threw 30,000 gold coins on the table. The hall froze, and all representatives were stunned. Only after that they were ready to listen to his proposal. Aitlek was a great trade state in which 8 major lakes were located, and power belonged to 8 trade guilds, the governor of the country jointly. Now representatives, the heads of guilds, showed a lively interest in negotiations. Ruan announced that he intends to purchase weapons in the amount of 30,000 gold, and in return he demanded permission to trade in Ard products. He was immediately asked if he was preparing for war, because such a purchase of weapons looked like preparations for hostilities. The amount also raised questions of 30,000 gold were equal to the 3-year budget of a small lord or the annual budget of the middle city. But the Ruan noted that where there is power, there is wealth, which means that it should invest in strengthening its territory. Then she asked the question whether any of those present on weapons specializes. Everyone immediately looked at the first representative, a girl whose family was engaged in the supply of weapons, oars, and fleets. Despite her youth, her gaze was cold and insightful. She asked what use he would find all this weapon, saying that this is extremely important for her as a supplier. The first step in his plans, the Ruans saw a hunt for monsters living near its territory. The weapon was supposed to be not just a tool for protection, but the key to creating a trading route between Ardell and Aitlek, passing through the southern mountains. As soon as he voiced this idea, one of the representatives sharply asked not to mention these lands. Irin did not immediately understand what was the reason for this tension, but Ruan noticed concern on the face of the first representative. Cecilia, the head of the Valtrak family, announced that it was impossible to cross the southern mountains since Cheeto's powerful demon lives there. Ruan calmly replied that last night they crossed these lands alone, but Cecilia did not believe it and called it a lie. Then he presented the mane of a silver werewolf, proving that the threat was eliminated and the task of delivering an artifact was completed. Cecilia has changed sharply in the face. Suddenly she burst into tears, which stunned all those present. 3 days after the negotiations, Cecilia went to the ruin, admitted that she had never thought that she could approach these mountains again, and thanked him. Now, when the monster was destroyed, she finally could look at this path again without horror. After all, after she killed her father, she could not overcome her grief. The ruins realized that if it was possible to establish a route through the southern mountains, this could open up new opportunities with the outcome, since this path will significantly reduce time and expenses. Cecilia supported this idea, saying that her family Valtrock will help with the implementation. For Ruan, this was a surprise. He only hoped to strengthen relations with Eitlek through weapons trading, but now he received much greater support. To clarify the details, he asked if they accept his proposal. Cecilia responded in the affirmative. In addition, she stated that the goods from Ardell would be sold and purchased at a price above the market. The deal was concluded, and after that, the Ruins and Irene went back to Ardell to share the news with his father. During the path, Irene noticed that Ruan praised Cecilia, calling her a worthy person. In any case, Ruan said that Ardell would change soon, and invited Irene to look at their town again. When he returned home, his father and Baggins were shocked by the fact that the products of Ardell would be sold at a price above the market. It was even more surprised that the initiative came from the representatives of Eitlek themselves. However, the real shock was that Cecilia personally gave the floor. Everyone knew about her tragedy and her cold character, so her decision caused a real resonance. Father was immensely happy with these changes, but even more that his son was so mature and was able to cope with this himself. After that, the Ruin asked to entrust him with another important matter. He was going to take revenge on his mother and start hunting on the plain Chinhin. When the Ruin was 6 years old, his birthday turned into a real nightmare. Mud people attacked the village. Dozens of people died. But the most painful blow for the boy was the death of the mother. Since then, her image began to wash in his memory, and only the portrait reminded him of her face. Then he made himself an oath to become stronger and never again allow such tragedies. Returning to business after a conversation with his father, Ruan gave instructions on the destruction of monsters. Residents began to train hard, which greatly pleased him. Irene also noticed interesting techniques in their preparation and asked who teaches people. Ruan replied that a military leader named Sir Boldvar Peyton was responsible for training. In the past, he was known under the nickname Flash, and he fought for the kingdom. Once his strength was inspired by fear of enemies, but now he led a more measured life. Noticing Ruan, Peyton greeted him with a smile, noting that he once again excited everyone. First with his victory at the festival, and now the intention to go hunting. Irene, without losing the moment, introduced herself and with excitement added that she was glad to meet the legendary saint with a spear. She admitted that she read many stories about him and knew that he was one of the 11 most talented knights. She was particularly impressive by the story of how he burst out alone through 10 magicians of the highest rank. Peyton only smiled, noticing that he was now not the one he was in the past. Ruan, in amazement, realized that he knew nothing about such an important part of his past. But Sir Peyton replied that the guy may know him even better than anyone. After all, only Ruan remembered him as a man who was fishing at the house, walked with him when he was a child, and played with him as a child. The guy admitted that he really saw him from the other side, unlike the others. After that, Peyton announced that today the Ruin has a practice. At first they watched the classes of the younger sister. Her skill was amazing, and even the Ruins were impressed. But despite her confident attacks, Balvar fought all this time with one left hand. When the lesson ended, she was very praised, even noting that the girl was already surpassing her brother in the technique of a sword. Ruan silently agreed. Now his turn has come. When the guy was 9 years old, Peyton also gave him training, explaining that the magician needs to be able to fight the knights on an equal footing. Now having martial arts and knowledge, Ruan was ready to show what he had learned over the years. But a long battle did not last. The young man was completely defeated. However, Peyton noted that his skills have improved significantly over these 7 years, although the Ruins lying on Earth did not feel much joy from this. The guy became interested in how much his teacher was strong in his youth. But Balvar could not give an exact answer because it was too long. Then Ruan recalled Golter Pirante, the only 6-star knight in Radian. Peyton only smiled, noting that 20 years ago, when he left the Order, he had 7 stars and the guy froze in place. At this moment, a new test appeared in front of him to deliver a critical blow to a chopper within 3 days. Time restriction made him be alert, because now he was clearly not at the level to cope with such a task. Irene noticed that the Ruan was incredibly lucky, because not everyone was going to train with the 7-star knight. Realizing what chance he had, Ruans with even greater determination began training. Within 3 days, he continuously trained, persistently working on the completion of the task. And his efforts were not in vain. After many hours of training, the Ruan remained to fulfill the last task to deliver a critical blow to a plower. Before the test, only half an hour remained, and he could not afford to give up, because over the last sleepless nights, he achieved a huge breakthrough. His whole family went out to look at this final battle. Even her sister tried to dissuade him, believing that training went too far. But Ruan insisted on his own, assuring that this was his last attempt and asked to give him half an hour. He changed tactics and decided to fight without weapons, as he had already learned to predict the movements of his mentor. In addition, he received permission to use magic, because in close combat he could reveal his potential in full. Balvar was not going to facilitate the task and said that he would be as serious as possible. He did not let Ruan close, forcing him to constantly look for an approach. The guy realized that the tactics that he used against Prime is not always effective. Balvar began to read his movements and at a certain moment made a sharp attack, but the Ruan used the light spell, blinding the enemy and taking it by surprise. He apologized to the mentor, and he understood that in the battle of 30 years ago, this technique would not work. However, the task was completed. At that moment, his sister rushed at him with a reproach, indignant as he could knock down the sick of the sick. But the Ruan, exhausted and pleased, was only grateful to the teacher. The mentor praised him and then went to refresh him, pleased with the test. The holidays came to an end, and it was time to return to the academy. On the way with the father of the Ruans, he noticed the workers whom the family of Valtrak sent. They realized that the scale of construction is expanding, and now Ardell will have full-fledged trade routes. Ruan felt satisfaction because the beginning of a great thing was laid. Before leaving, the guy again handed his father a box in which 12,000 gold lay. Father did not want to accept them, but the Ruan insisted, saying that the money should go to the development of the homeland. They hugged goodbye. Thus ended his holidays, which turned out to be incredibly productive. Together with Irene, he set off on the return trip, but their roads soon had to disperse. Before farewell, Irin promised that after graduation it would help him in the destruction of monsters. For her, following Ruan was an important goal, because she still wanted to surpass him. When the guy crossed the border and entered the eastern region, he saw how many people gathered around. Suddenly, his attention was attracted by a fight. One of the bandits hit a young knight who was kneeling in front of the crowd. The young man begged to let his sister let go, screaming that he was also a knight and would not leave it unpunished. But his words only cheered the villains. They stated that his family did not pay debts, which means that he must pay for this with life. One of the bandits grinned and said that he would sell his sister into slavery. The guy rushed into a fight, but immediately received a strong blow in the face, and then he was grabbed by the hair. The bandits did not pay attention to the crowd, mocking him right in front of his sister's eyes. Ruan was outraged by this sight, but as soon as he stepped forward, the locals stopped him, warning that it was dangerous to intervene. They recalled that in front of him, people from the gang of Andy Lambert, and the one who crosses the road risks his life. But the Ruan grinned sarcastically and asked what everyone else was doing then, since they are ready to inactive in the face of injustice. The crowd looked away, and he resolutely went forward. With one movement, sending one of the offenders to the ground, the offender said that he was surrendering. The guy who was beaten looked at him in amazement. In the evening, Ruan went home to the guy. The young man introduced himself to Hans. His story was sad. Their family was in debt due to his father's drunkenness, and now they wanted to sell his sister into slavery. Ruan asked who these bandits and the guy were with a gloomy face, replied that Andy Lamberty is an incredibly cruel group. If someone has angry them, they can torture a person, tied him to the horses, or quit die in the desert. Hans admitted that he had heard of the Ruan as a representative of the great festival. Ruan asked if he was familiar with Sir Golter Perante. The boy was surprised how the guy guessed this, and Ruan explained that he had heard the conversation of the bandits who called him the knight of the territory of Folden. It turned out that the captain of Hans often talked about the Ruan, admiring his strength and achievements. The boy dreamed of becoming as strong as his mentor, but was the last at the academy, because of which he constantly suffered ridicule. The only person who believed in his potential was Gulter Perante. Ruan learned his story in this when everyone was criticized and humiliated. The professor and the head of the academy believed in it. The conversation did not last a long time. The bandits returned, intending to end the Hans's family once and for all. But when they burst into the house, the Ruan stood in front of them alone. He put on gloves, concentrated all his strength, and was ready for a new battle. The opponents rushed to the attack at the same time, but he was already too experienced after training with a major. The Ruan used the skill of the Steel Destroyer, and when his fist came in touch with the enemy, their sword broke from the blow. The rest froze dumbfounded, not understanding how this is possible. Using all power, he defeated them alone. Those who still could move have already begged for mercy, but the situation has changed dramatically. The leader of the gang, Nozel, grabbed Hans's sister, putting a knife to her throat, and ordered his people to continue the battle. He viciously shouted that there should not be any requests for mercy, and instead they need to tie the Ruan. The situation became critical. Ruan did not understand what to do because one wrong step and Hans's sister is the end. Suddenly Hans cut his throat with a sharp movement. Shocked bandits in a panic fled. The young man stood in a place shocked by the fact that he had just killed a man. Ruan calmly put his hand on his shoulder, trying to calm him down. He noticed that a blue aura came from Hans, which meant that he reached the 4th knightly rank. Although the boy still did not know how to control his mana, it was a huge progress. Now nothing threatened his sister anymore. The Hans family was saved, and the Ruan himself went to the academy the next day. Returning to the academy, he suddenly realized how much he missed. If before the guy did not want the holidays to end, now he was glad to return. When meeting with Jason, he immediately fell asleep him with questions, asking what he was doing all this time. Ruan thought that it would be possible to tell, but too much happened, so he simply replied that he had trained with a sword. Jason snorted, saying that the holidays were needed to relax and not for exhausting training. At that moment, their conversation was interrupted by Professor Ardell. He invited Ruan to go to the window, and when he looked out, he saw the guests. Someone very important arrived at the academy. Ruan instantly guessed who it was because he had already exchanged letters with them, but did not expect that they would come so quickly. As soon as the carriage opened, 2 young people came out of it. They turned out to be princes, Croster Radian and Foster Radian. Ruan respectfully greeted them, and they immediately began to argue among themselves. He quickly realized what was the essence of their visit. Both princes wanted to lure him to their side in order to increase their chances to become crowns. Ruan was not going to make hasty elections and suggested that they discuss the 3 of them. Radian remained the weakest state on the continent, and inside the kingdom a conflict flared up between the 2 princes supporting different fractions. One adhered to monarchical traditions, the other strove for reforms. Their visit to the academy was quite expected by both tried to enlist the support of the Ruan. Even here they could not resist controversy and quarreled who would get a place next to him. Ruan quickly realized that both princes behave infantilely, but was in no hurry to take a drawing side. He announced that he was not going to become someone else's vassal and will return to Ardell after release to develop his own lands. However, since he remains within the kingdom, he can become his strength. The princes immediately assured him that they would help in the development of its territories, provide financial support, and send resources. Ruan took advantage of the moment and put forward oncoming conditions. He demanded that both princes support his projects and also allocate the military to clean the lands from monsters. The guy was not going to choose between them. He was beneficial for both to work for him. Addressed by the fact that he would not leave the kingdom, the princes appointed him the defender of the royal family and declared the national treasure of Radian. Let it be an unofficial title, but its meaning was difficult to overestimate. The academy immediately began violent discussions, because earlier the role of defenders was occupied by only members of the Gerichel family, and now the Ruans took their place. Among the audience appeared Mikal. He was boiling with anger because he could not stand it when he was discussed. In a fit of anger, he stated that after graduation he would strangle everyone for himself, regardless of their status. Even after he was caught on the use of prohibited substances during the fight, his family managed to avoid exclusion and he returned to the academy. Ruan coldly reminded him that the princes now have a different opinion about the Garle family. Mikal grinned and said that the battle is not over yet, and see who will laugh the last. Jason only shrugged, noticing that Mikal was just jealous of the Ruan. After his triumph at the great festival, the reputation of Garle staggered greatly, which struck their pride. In general, graduates were supposed to arrive in the academy in the second semester in order to conduct practical exercises. Everyone was looking forward to who would be their mentors. As a result, Garle appeared before them. Since this semester was focused on practices, invited graduates had to train younger magicians and knights. Garle decided to start with a lecture on the influence of their family on the palace magicians. He proudly told how powerful Garles were, and then, as if by chance, he looked at Ruan, and the elder sarcastically stated that if we indulge the commoners, then the life of the rest could turn into as negligible as his. In response, the Ruans replied that out of a dozen heaps of garbage, nothing valuable will appear in the best case. It would be even a large landfill. Garle immediately clung to his words, asking if he called him garbage. Their skirmish became more fierce. Garle recalled his brother's stories, calling Ruan a loser, but he calmly retorted, recalling that it was this loser who tumbled Michelle to the floor. The rivalry between their families only intensified. The elder Garle began to openly recruit students, offering to go to his side, and some supported the Ruan and others of his enemies. Two camps were formed at the academy, supporters of Ardell and adherents of Garle. Suddenly, the head of the academy caused Ruan to discuss the situation within the school. He asked how things are among the students, to which the Ruan replied that everything was going on as usual, except for the tension associated with Garle. The head decided to talk more about him. Garle was incredibly popular thanks to appearance, eloquence, and impeccable behavior. However, cold calculation was hidden behind this impeccability. He longed for power and was ready to go to everything to achieve his goals. Ruan thought about how to resist such a person. The conversation smoothly moved to the upcoming special occupation. The head said that he suggested Garle to organize joint training of graduates and current students, but he refused. Ruan immediately went to the lesson to talk with Garle personally. Without wasting time, he said that he had heard about the proposal of the head of the academy, and that the representative of Garle rejected him. The students who were present during the conversation lit up with this idea, but Garle immediately retorted that he did not see the point in this. He stated that this is only a waste of time. However, Ruan expected a similar answer. The young man immediately pointed out the contradiction. The graduates should have taught the younger ones, but at the same time they themselves avoided joint classes. Is this not evidence of his fear of battle? Garle laughed and said that even if Ruan won the great festival, he is still not enough. He added that he could not resist the real weapon, which means that such training is simply meaningless. But the students presented, demanding to see the ability of Garle himself. At that moment, Mikal intervened. He with a grin stated that this is an ideal opportunity to publicly humiliate the Ruan, and knocked his brother to accept the call. Garle squinted but still agreed, warning Ruan that he would regret it. Since this was supposed to be an official lesson, Folden's knights will also take part in it. After the discussion they shook hands, but at that moment the Ruans applied its strength. He squeezed his palm with such force that it seemed a warning, and then, as if by chance, he threw a mysterious phrase, advising to prepare for a surprise. 3 days later, the Knights of Folden arrived at the academy, and their appearance was caused by universal enthusiasm. Among them was Sir Golter, who immediately greeted the Ruan, congratulated on the great festival, and asked to look after his interns. While the knights met the students, Ruan noticed how a group of students mocks Hans. They humiliated him as before, as if it were the usual entertainment for them. Stepping closer, the Ruan asked what was happening here. He answered one of the Maltese Gengen, a representative of Folden. He began to boast that his father commanded gold knights, but Ruan did not understand why all this. When the guy demanded an explanation again, Maltiv with a grin replied that the commoner had stopped obeying, and they decided to arrange training for him. Ruan said that Hans his friend, and this caused laughter among representatives of the nobility, who considered it logical that commoners find their own kind. Malti added that the Ardell family does not deserve respect, and the conversation with Ruan is unpleasant for him. Suddenly, Garle approached them, and it became clear that he was friends with Maltiva. The atmosphere was heated, but at that moment they announced the beginning of a joint occupation, and everyone began to form groups. Each team was supposed to consist of 2 students of the academy and 1 knight. The Garle brothers, of course, immediately united with the Maltese. In turn, the Ruan invited Hans to form an alliance. Jason joined them, and their team was equipped. Ruan said that their goal is not just to score points, but to deal with an arrogant trinity. Before starting training, he spoke with Hans in the corridor of the academy, and suddenly they saw Maltiva in front of them. Ruan decided to use the player's eyes and look at his potential, also checked the level of the hens. He was surprised that he was still a knight of grade 3, although before that his sword had a blue aura. Ruan invited him to try to defeat Maltiv as he clearly underestimated his enemy. The Maltiv himself overheard the conversation, and from the same thought of the fight against Commonaria, he came into rabies. The guy ordered Hans to approach, but he refused, that he angered the knight even more. Unable to restrain his rage, he grabbed the sword, intending to attack. But then he was stopped by the blow of Sir Golter. The mentor strictly reported to him, saying that it was a serious violation to expose weapons in the walls of the academy. For this misconduct, Maltiv was immediately removed from the representative office of knights. Malto, in a panic, began to threaten that his father would be angry because of such a decision, but Golter only grinned. He assured that the parent's anger would be much stronger when he finds out that his son showed cowardice and disobeyed the disciplinary charter. Ruan noticed how quickly the arrogance of Hagen was replaced by fear at one mention of his father. In any case, the first stage of the joint occupation was the training of close combat. While some worked hard, Shaquille and Maltiv watched from the side, deciding that they did not need to spend strength on warm-up. Shaquille did not like to train in public at all, so as not to reveal his true power ahead of time. In contrast, the Ruan team laid out to the full. The Hans was almost exhausted, but the Ruans considered it only a light scum. During the break, Golter approached him with a proposal. He carefully watched the Ruan and noticed how much it became stronger, and such development could only be possible if the outstanding master coached it. At first, everyone took it like a joke, but Golter was extremely serious. He wanted to show those present that no one at the academy could compare with Ruan in the skill of owning a sword, and Ruan could show himself to his offenders. When the battle began, the audience was struck by the rate of exchange of blows. Any other would already be on Earth, but the Ruans were confident. Golter carefully watched his every movement, and then with surprise admitted that he did not expect to see such a level of skill. He directly asked who trained him. After a short thought, the Ruans replied that his mentor was Sir Brozar Peyton. This caused a real shock among the audience. Everyone was sure that this knight was dead for a long time. When he was asked how he met the legendary warrior, the guy calmly replied that he knew him since childhood. However, Maltiv immediately accused him of lies. The reaction was quite expected, because his father was considered the strongest knight of the kingdom. If it became known that Balvar is alive, the ratings would have changed. Ruan only shrugged, saying that his mentor was completely not interested in anyone's regalia and title. He can consider the strongest anyone, but this will not cancel the fact that Balvar is alive. Maltiv could not endure that someone could underestimate his father, and immediately challenged the Ruan. But before he managed to take at least a step, Golter crashed to him and asked him, was he really unable to fight? As a result, he announced that the first match in group tests would be the battle between the Ruan team and the Maltiv team. There were no objections. The next day, everyone was looking forward to the battle. Shaquille, grinning, asked if the Ruan was ready for the upcoming battle. As soon as the battle began, the Ruans instantly left the blow, showing an incredible speed, which shocked the audience. He activated the player's eye and directed him to Shaquille, and what he saw, he was surprised by the representative of the family Garle possessed 6 hidden artifacts. On the eve of the night, the fathers of Shaquille and Maltiv met to discuss the successes of their sons and their invitation to the Ignant Academy. The conversation quickly moved to Ruan Ardell, whose name was already rattling all over the kingdom. They considered him an upstart from the province that did not deserve such a quick take off. They were especially worried that the Ruans could lure the princes to his side, which means to strengthen their influence. Since their sons found themselves in the same team, they decided to help them eliminate the competitor, and Father Shaquille offered to transfer artifacts to the Melodum. At this moment, Hungarian, the father of Maltiv, hesitated, but Garle convinced him that the Ruan should be eliminated as a threat. He himself had already supplied Shaquille with valuable artifacts, and now the turn of his ally has come. When the name of Palvar Peyton sounded in the conversation, this led Hungrace to be confused. He could not believe that this knight was still alive, but if this is true, then the power of the Ruin was explained by his training. Both came to the conclusion that if you do not destroy the guy now, he will become a threat to their position.
They finally concluded a deal,
And they handed the magic objects to the sons. In the battle, Chakil almost defeated the Ruin, paralyzing it with movements, and Maltiv had to finish the guy. He struck but missed. Ruin noticed that the enemy's wooden sword was felt as if he was made of steel. The guy quickly guessed that this was the work of an amulet of resistance hanging at the opponent around his neck. Since he himself had the skill of the destroyer, he activated him and broke the Maltiv weapon into pieces. Chakil could not believe what was happening. Then the Ruin activated its gloves, and a fiery OGR appeared behind him. Ruin, with contempt, stated that even 6 artifacts did not help them defeat him. It was just a shame to use such power against the younger ones. He remembered how Mikal was at first, then Chakil could immediately call George. Chakil rushed at him for mentioning his father, but the guy easily threw him back. The rest of the students still could not take his eyes off the fiery. And the head of the academy was amazed, at least the rest. Of course, the Ruin did not want to reveal this power before everyone, but it was always impossible to hide it. Mikal, who saw the spirit behind Ruin, simply collapsed to the ground. They were already preparing to declare the winner, but suddenly Hans intervened. He stated that the duel is not over yet. Approaching Maltat, he saw that he had a sword and offered him another. This gesture only angered Maltiv even stronger, because how could a commoner throw a call to him? At that moment, a bright blue aura flashed around the sword of Hans.